We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday. We had the Michigan primary last night, and it ended pretty much the way you'd expect. There's some bits of information about that primary, and we'll get to that story very shortly here. But of course, we always have some emails to check in with. Love having the emails. Love the input from the listeners. I think it's very valuable to the show. So I'm appreciative every time I get emails. And it seems like more and more we're getting more and more emails, which is awesome. So keep them coming. Send your emails to rationalboomer@gmail.com. First one starts out, hello, Mike. Little question. What news outlets would you recommend to non Americans like me? I want to be up to date about Trump's legal and political tribulations, but in a realistic and non BS way. Well, I tell you, I check a number of them, and they all could have potential problems. Um, but what I do is I kind of cross check them. I look at different places, and if they all have the same story, chances are it's pretty accurate. But some places you can get valuable information. I think AP, BBC, um, The Hill. I think frequently I'll look at Raw Story and Huffington Post. Um, they can be a little shaky on some things, but they usually have good information and at least enough information that allows me to check in some of the other sources. So I try to corroborate all the information. If it seems a little weird, I'll try to corroborate it with other places. And if I can do that, generally, I feel pretty confident that it's true. Now, he goes on to say, until now, I read online the Midas Touch Network, the Huffington Post, Politico, and Reuters. But the Trump appeals his NY $355 million judgment story when he only filed a notice of appeal reveals that only the Midas Touch Network reported it correctly. The Huffington Post and Reuters treated it as an appeal, which it was not, and Politico didn't even mention it. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Politico is usually a good one, but keep in mind, Politico is owned by a rabid Republican. So I don't put a lot of weight into Politico. Reuters is usually pretty good. But what's interesting about it is that when I first heard it come out, the first thing I thought was, uh, yeah, but did he put up the money? How come they're not talking about him putting up the money? And then when I dug a little deeper, listened a little longer, I found out, well, it's not really an appeal. I think most media outlets put that out there. And I think one of the things, well, a couple of things they do that is because they're looking to make the biggest splash when they report this stuff. And, maybe theoretically, he filed a notice to appeal, and they thought they could just say, well, it's appeal, meaning he probably has the money. Otherwise, he wouldn't have filed this notice of appeal, which is absolute bullshit. Donald Trump is trying to delay all this money going out. And I'd be surprised if he had the money or if he had the loan set up or the bond set up. It is something all media does. So you have to be very careful. And as I say, I can't say go to one spot and you'll get all the best information. Go to the spots you trust and then try to corroborate the information like you did here. And that, unfortunately, is the way you get the best information. We shouldn't have to work that hard to get the simple facts, but the fact is we do, and that's unfortunate. So, what news outlets do you follow, and which of them would you recommend to a non US citizen? As always, thanks and keep up the good work. Irwin, Belgium. If you're a non American, BBC is usually pretty solid. NPR's possibly pretty honest too. These people aren't typically trying to scoop everybody else and are willing to take shortcuts. BBC, NPR, they're usually pretty good. But again, it's a matter of you doing the work and digging it out and trying to corroborate whatever it is you hear because You see this on TikTok a lot too. I see this happen all the time. I've seen little rumors come out, and they are kind of big rumors and they're big news stories. And then people on TikTok will jump on it right away. They're anxious to get on this big news and they put it out right away. First thing I do, if I don't see any other coverage of it but on TikTok, I'll take that headline and I'll put it into Google. And if nothing comes up, you know it's bullshit. So don't get caught doing something like that. I try to avoid it at all costs, just getting excited about a story and posting it because one of my favorite TikTokers posted it, because they can be fooled too and they can get anxious. And that's kind of what happens with that. All right. Thank you, Erwin from Belgium. I appreciate it. Next one is, hi, Boomer. We've mentioned many times these polls showing a large negative swing for Trump if there's a conviction in any upcoming criminal trials. Now you have pretty much convinced me not to worry about the polls. Polls sponsor bias, the landline factor, and just crazy forces unique to Trump all conspire to make these polls useless, in my honest opinion. I concur. I agree with you. But what we have seen again and again is Democrats outperforming the polls in elections. And I'm confident that will continue. Now, we witnessed Trump mock a handicapped guy, say racist things about 70% of the Earth's population, and use force against peaceful protesters for a photo op. We've heard him lie 30,000 times and brag about sexual assault consistent with 26 women accusing him of same. He's ripped off contractors, citizens, foreign countries, and children's charities. He told us to drink bleach and shine flashlights up our asses and kill 750,000 people with his utter incompetence. He gave Rush Limbaugh the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He openly tried to multi-stage a coup, corrupted a third of our government, and 1,000 idiots sit in jail thanks to him. He stole top secret documents and then showed them off like a 13-year-old. His business and almost everyone around him has pled or been found guilty of various crimes, and he's been found liable for rape. He's cruel, humorless, profoundly selfish, and absolutely lacking in empathy. A 10-year-old can spot his unfitness as a human being, and he walks around pasted in makeup with a loaded diaper, waving his teeny, greasy hands around saying insane shit. So, according to these polls, there are millions of people who have watched and listened to this for 7 years now. And as of right now, they still say, yes, sir, he's my guy. Yeah, it seems unlikely, doesn't it? But if Alvin Bragg convicts him of falsifying business records in the first degree, they'll finally throw up their hands and bravely declare, that's it. Now that's a bridge too far. Ask in the way that Jerry Seinfeld would. Who are these people? That's some impressive critical thinking these fucks are utilizing. Good grief. Best garage door Jeff. P.S. People who tell me he's going to get away with everything, I tell them if you view it that way, you're going to miss one entertaining show watching him crumble. And it's already started. So don't let it slip by you. The thing about it is um, you're never going to change the mind of the base. You're never going to convince them. The people that have all along been needed to um, switch over are the moderates, the independents, and the conservatives in the Republican Party, those people that don't identify as MAGA. Because you see, they never really were on board with Donald Trump. They vote for Republicans because daddy and grandpa and great grandpa all voted for Republicans. And they thought, well, he's a Republican and he's kind of a dipshit and he's outlandish, but he's our guy, so I'm going to vote for him. All this stuff that you laid out, Jeff, is starting to make people a little queasy, the people of a reasonable mind or reasonably reasonable mind. Not MAGA. We're not going to change MAGA. They're going to fight this to the end and be bitching about it well into 2025. But we don't need to switch them over. We don't need to convince all MAGA. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people think we need to do. The 25% or so that believe Donald Trump, they can continue to believe Donald Trump. They can vote for Donald Trump, but it's not enough. It's all of the Democrats and maybe 60 to 75% of the Republican Party. Either they don't vote or they vote Democrat, or they vote for a third party candidate like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who will take away from the Republicans. That split in the party is what's going to cause them to lose. And there's enough people in the middle, the conservatives and moderates, that can't stomach voting for Donald Trump. And that's a problem for Donald Trump. I mean, let's be honest, Republicans have a tough time in elections if there is a big turnout. And I think I can predict there's going to be a huge turnout in November. But even with a huge turnout, the Republicans can only win if their party is completely unified and they can pick up some independents. They pretty much lost the independents, and they've lost some of the relatively intelligent Republicans that can't stomach them. This is why Republicans can't win. This is why Donald Trump can't win. He can't even pull his entire full party. So how can he win an election? It's amazing when you make that list, Jeff, how just appalling it is, how horrific, how disturbing it is. And anybody with a reasonable mind can see that. It's not like he had one minor infraction. It's infraction after infraction. And how many times do you have to get hit with something like that for it to hit home and make you choose something other than a crazy fucking insurrectionist? There will always be people that vote for Donald Trump, but there'll be enough people that can't do it, and that is why Donald Trump doesn't have a fucking prayer when it comes to November. All right, the next email. Good evening. I'm writing today with some further possibilities for the Smirnoff debacle. Smirnoff is the witness that the Republicans in the House were so proud of, that had the goods on Joe Biden and his bribery situation. Find out he's a liar, then we find out he's getting his information from the Russians. Emailer goes on to say, you are worried about possible Russian infiltration of your FBI, which on the reporting of events is a valid concern. But ask yourself this, is the reporting wholly factual? The information obviously came from Russian intelligence, but was it freely given, or was it given by a compromised official Smirnoff bribed or blackmailed into espionage? Was the documents handed over the full file, or one section of a game scenario, and whoever handed it over didn't have access to the entire file? Intelligence services like the military run game scenarios to develop plans and actions for hundreds of possibilities. The documents may possibly have been one scenario games out to analyze possible reactions within America, or may not have been scheduled for more in-depth planning. Smirnoff may have been bribed or bribed someone to get information on a current exercise, and that is what was produced. Smirnoff, being an FBI asset, hands it over to not knowing the full scope of the situation. It would be the FBI's responsibility to fully get info, which they obviously tried to do because they noted on the 1023 that the information was UN verified and could not be trusted. The FBI did their job and could not corroborate the information, so did not act on it. The Republicans demanded the 1023 to be released, so the FBI had no choice but to comply with the congressional subpoena. If the Republicans weren't such brain dead morons, no one would have ever heard of the 1023's existence. So I believe to assign blame for the incompetence in this matter is misplaced. Stephanie. Well, Stephanie, you make a good point. Honestly, I hadn't considered that maybe the information is real. But the blame certainly falls within the Republicans in Congress. I mean, they were warned that this is untrustworthy information, and they chose to use it in spite of that, mainly because they were so desperate to get Joe Biden, and they were willing to take that risk, a risk that they will be sorry for a long time to come. They may suffer some consequences because of it. But what you're saying is, did the FBI do everything they were supposed to do? Conceivably, that's true. That's true. One thing Congress did too, the 1023 form isn't known to have evidence. It's basically a tip sheet. Nobody in their right mind would use that as evidence, but of course the Republicans did. We've got plenty of issues with the FBI. Whether they're at fault in this situation, based on your scenario, maybe not. Maybe not. But it is something that needs to be investigated, because if they are at fault here, that's a big problem within a very serious intelligence agency in this country. Keep in mind, in the FBI, there are still people from the Trump era working in the FBI. They weren't cleansed out of there when Joe Biden came into office. The FBI has done suspect things over the years. And also keep in mind that the director, Wray, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I'm not suggesting he's complicit with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has done nothing but give Director Wray a lot of trouble. The thing about it is that there's too much we don't know, and that's where the problem lies. I mean, we could be looking at some serious crimes, or we could be looking at nothing in terms of the FBI. But over and above it all, the group that is complicit are the Republicans in Congress. Yes, I know that the FBI had to turn it over because there was a subpoena, or did they? Because apparently subpoenas don't carry the weight that we all thought they did, because there are members of Congress that refused to subpoena. They did not comply. So is the FBI required to comply? Theoretically, yes, but again, subpoenas in Congress or from Congress don't apparently have any teeth at all. If you want me to say, okay, let's not blame the FBI for the moment, I think that's fine. That's fine. The real issue is with the Republicans in Congress, and we need that investigation, because if these people knew exactly what they were dealing with and still chose to use it, that's a problem. They knowingly used stuff that could have been a lie, could have just been not true at all, in order to try to impeach and take down a sitting president. That sounds a little problematic to me. So we need to investigate that. And as I've said before, the way I like to deal with things, I like to take it a step at a time, focus on one thing, and then move to the next. And in this situation, what I would suggest is, given the imminent problem is with the members of Congress, the Republicans, and their attempt to impeach Joe Biden, that we investigate them and see what their mindset was and how they obtained some of the materials and information they had, and see if they are culpable for any crimes that may have been committed. Focus on that first. That would do us best leading up to the election. And then if we find out that there were some crimes with the sitting members of Congress, deal with them accordingly And then the next step would be to talk to the FBI, because the FBI didn't necessarily want to turn over this information or the witness. They told Congress that, yeah, this is suspect. You don't want to use it. So the real problem here is with the members of Congress, and that investigation needs to be done. Anytime our Congress is infiltrated with bad information, regardless of where they get it from, this is a huge problem for this country. So I'll give you that, Stephanie. We don't know for sure that the FBI is culpable for anything here other than doing their job. But I think it deserves a look, but not until after we deal with the members of Congress. There you go, Stephanie. We got a compromise. Maybe I did jump the gun on FBI. Maybe I didn't. The problem is here we don't know. And we need to know at some point. Let's deal with Congress. Let's deal with the members trying to impeach a perfectly innocent president. And then maybe after the election, go look into the FBI. Or better yet, let's clean it out. Let's get rid of Ray. Let's get rid of some of the dead weight, the cancer that was left over by Donald Trump, and try to start things over in the FBI in a more professional way than what we've seen with the FBI as of late. All right. Next email. Hi, Mike. You mentioned on yesterday's podcast that they're asking for a gag order. I'm not surprised that it has been requested and will probably be granted. If he hasn't started already, you know he's going to claim election interference or taking away his free speech. Obviously, that's false. You asked about what penalties he might receive for violating it. According to a couple of TikToks I saw involving attorneys, they agreed that in criminal cases, jail time is the default punishment for contempt of court, unlike civil court where the money is the default. I'm expecting him to violate this order or have an outburst in the first few days of the trial. It would be awesome when it happens for the judge to order him held until he apologizes and understands he can't act that way he does. If he's held until he apologizes, he'd be held until the end of trial. Good luck campaigning from a jail cell. Now, in terms of being unsure about what the repercussions or the punishment would be for breaking a gag order, I knew that jail was the default. That wasn't my question. My question was, what will the judges do? Up to this point, we haven't seen judges act or hold Donald Trump accountable much. That was my question. We're in a criminal trial. He violates the gag order. What are they going to do? I know what they can do. I know what they should do. But what will they do? This is going to be very telling because he, without question, is going to violate the gag order. So we'll see. Donald Trump has gotten away with a lot of shit that normal people wouldn't have gotten away with in all these trials and all these hearings. There has to come a time where he's accountable and something is done to shut his fucking orange mouth. All right, the email finishes up. Apparently, Trump is trying to get the testimony from Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen blocked in the upcoming case. He claims that Michael Cohen will lie on the stand and Stormy Daniels is doing it for publicity. I could be wrong, but isn't that what you bring up in court and with them on the stand to prove his innocence? We know he doesn't understand how this works. His attorney can't do their jobs because he's too incompetent and won't let them do what they are trained to do. Yeah, that's the big ploy with Donald Trump as of yesterday. He wants Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels to be blocked from testifying in the case where they are the most important witnesses. I mean, it's a yeoman's try, but it's not going to work. It's absolutely ridiculous to suggest that they'd want to do that or would do that. But this is the same old bullshit we're used to with Donald Trump. He'll throw a Hail Mary pass, it will drop in the end zone with nobody near it, and he may have chewed up a bit of the clock. Donald Trump is doing nothing but failing these days, and that failure will continue. Michael Cohen will testify, and Stormy Daniels will testify. All right, the next one says, "Hey Boomer, interesting day. Today Macron of France said that the European troops being sent to the Ukraine is not off the table. Of course, there was some pushback on that, but let's look at something. Let's look at the utter hypocrisy of the self-proclaimed Christian MAGA right-wing Bible pumpers in Congress, holding themselves up as true believers, and of course their love of Jesus and how God is in everything in America. Really? Right now, Mikey? I know Jesus personally. Johnson, for fear of his little job and pissing off Sneaker Boy, has held up aid to Israel and, more importantly, Ukraine. This is what obviously prompted Macron's observations. Our aid helped block and frustrate Putin from executing his aggression and terror in Ukraine and thereby preventing an expansion of the war. The cutoff of aid now opens the door to yet another European war. We've heard constantly from Mikey how devout and he is dedicated to Christ. So, someday, according to what Mikey believes, he will be before Jesus or God or whoever and be judged. He will have to answer when God asks him, "Why did you not take actions to help those people under attack from an evil man who wanted to enslave them and others?" How do you explain, because of your vanity and pettiness and hypocrisy, you allowed a bigger war to start and destroyed millions of innocent people and cause untold suffering? I would like to hear Mr. Bible Thumper, along with his holier than thou pro life bunts, answer that. I would bet a pair of gold sneakers it never has or will enter the minds of these traitorous, low life bastards at all. We know who they really stand with, don't we? Thanks, Mike. We are the ones who will take this country back, Z Man. Yeah, Z Man, you're absolutely right. Um, Fact of the matter is that this is running rampant through all of the evangelicals and many of these organized religious leaders. They like to take the Bible, they like to misinterpret it, they like to cherry pick from it, and then they pervert it to somehow work to their advantage. They justify everything they do with the Bible, even though what they say the Bible says is usually inaccurate. These are the same people that do the very same thing with the Constitution. We have a written document, it's fairly clear, and if you have average intelligence, you can understand what it says. But for decades and decades, whether we're talking about the Second Amendment or if we're talking about the separation of church and state, they've got all the answers. They're all inaccurate, but in their minds, it's for the greater good, that they get what they want because they know, because they believe they're in line with God or Jesus. Or do they? Do they understand that they're doing this for their own benefit, that they're doing this for their own enrichment? You know, there's a thing I talked about one time before. When I was in business, from time to time, I would run across potential associates or clients. And in the business I was in, it's real easy to get real excited about something and be fooled. Not unlike what I was talking about with the news stories. They get real excited about it. They maybe didn't have a good month, so they jump in headlong and then they fail and they lose all their money. This happens all the time. Now they have to scramble to try to make it back and get their feet back under them. But they're in a desperation mode. They made that first mistake because they were greedy or desperate and they took ridiculous chances. So now they're really in trouble. They are broke. And I would find myself in a position with those folks, and I always refuse to work with them. Because you see, um, when people are desperate, when people are in a bad situation financially, they will find ways to grift or steal money, and then they'll rationalize it out in their own minds. And if they're confronted with it, they'll try to rationalize it out to you. Anytime you're dealing with somebody in a desperate situation, you're going to probably lose. You don't want to get on that train because it can't go anywhere but down the shitter. And that's kind of what we're looking at with these MAGA fucks, these evangelicals, the religious right, whatever you want to call them. They see the writing on the wall. They see what's coming. They know they're going to lose, even though they may act confident and they may say, oh, we've got this, we've got this. They know. So now is the time when they will go off the rails a bit, do whatever it takes to get them back on track, no matter how dirty, no matter how criminal or corrupt it is. And they will justify it by saying, well, I had to do it for the greater good. That's the situation we're in now with those folks. They're in trouble. They know it. And there is no limitation that they have to get themselves back on track because they're special. They're God's favorite. They feel like, well, I'll do this small indiscretion, but it's for the good of everybody because then I'll be on track and I'll get what I need done, and this country will get what it needs done, and that misadventure will be worth it to benefit everybody with this greater good, which is all a bunch of bullshit. It's all a bunch of bullshit. They will rationalize it out. And that's something you have to be aware of when you're dealing with people in business or people in the religious right or politicians. This is what the politicians are doing. Most of the people that are Republicans in the House and the Senate know Donald Trump is full of shit, that he is dangerous to this country. But they want to get reelected. They want to do the fundraising. So they're willing to do whatever it is to get reelected and get that fundraising, even if it's criminal. And the way they rationalize it is, oh, well, we don't want the Democrats to be in control because then the world is going to go to hell because they believe that. So they're willing to do virtually anything. We've seen Mitch McConnell do it. We saw Kevin McCarthy do it, Mike Johnson do it, the Republicans in general do it. They're in desperation mode right now. They will do anything and then they will justify it. That's something we have to be very careful of. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, we are back. And of course, last night we had the Michigan primary, both for Democrats and Republicans. No real big surprises there, but there were a few issues that we need to talk about. As I said, there's no surprise. Former President Donald Trump won a decisive victory in the Republican presidential primary in Michigan last night. Trump defeated, of course, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, his only remaining viable competitor for the GOP presidential nomination. Trump did not campaign heavily in Michigan, holding his last event in the state, a get out and vote kind of rally on February 17th in Waterford Township. In his remarks to the crowd in an outer suburb of Detroit, Trump hit on familiar themes, including the disastrous impact that he believes Biden's pro electric vehicle policies will have on Michigan's economy. He probably didn't mention the fact that Joe Biden is endorsed by the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and he is not. He also blasted UAW President Sean Fain for negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement that Trump claimed did not fight hard enough against the industry's transition to electric vehicles that can be manufactured with fewer jobs. Michigan, you're going to get so screwed. You can't believe it, he said. Well, that's a good way to have a campaign speech. You're fucked unless you vote for me. Well, apparently the UAW knows better than that, and that's why they endorsed Joe Biden as opposed to the disastrous Donald Trump. So, how did the election come out? Okay, this was a big difference, a big departure from what we had in South Carolina for actually both of the main candidates. Trump took 67% of the votes, which is about 7% higher than what he got in South Carolina. Nikki Haley got about 28% of the votes, so nearly a 40% difference. And that's troubling for Nikki Haley. She says she's staying in regardless, and we know why she's doing it. She knows she can't beat him in the primaries. She's waiting for him to keel over or to get thrown in jail or something else. And as I've said before, that's probably a good bet. Something like that is going to happen. Now, the only problem Nikki Haley has is she going to keep getting the funding that she needs in order to continue the campaign? We know that the Koch money dried up. They pulled the rug out from under her, took their money, and that is a pretty substantial chunk of money. However, she's done pretty well with fundraising. She's certainly not broke because of it. It's a little harder for her, but she's not broke, and she will continue on. My guess is she'll continue on until after she gets completely wiped out in Super Tuesday. She has virtually no chance of winning any primary. And again, I think she knows that. It's just a matter of she's trying to run out the clock, or at least run out Donald Trump's clock. And that's kind of what's going on there. So we'll see if her strategy works. How long can Donald Trump hold out? Well, if you've seen his speaking engagements as of recently, he's struggling. He's slurring his speech. He's going off on tangents. He's obviously distracted. I mean, he's got a lot of pressure hanging over his head right now, and because of that, it's even harder for him to stay on track. So we'll see if Nikki Haley's bet pans out. Now, on the Democratic side of things, it was a little less strong for Biden in Michigan than it was in South Carolina. And there's one very good reason for it. Biden received 80% of the vote. Marianne Williamson got 3% of the vote, kind of the same of what happened in South Carolina. Dean Phillips got 2.8%, which is similar. You know, we've talked about Dean Phillips. Give it up, motherfucker. You don't have a prayer. You're not getting anywhere, and Marianne Williamson isn't any better. So why then did Joe Biden only get 80% as opposed to, say, 95%? Well, you've no doubt heard this story about all these people in Michigan that were going to make a protest vote and vote uncommitted. And that's exactly what happened. Some people suspected it might be as many as 10%. Well, as it turns out, it was 14% of the folks that voted uncommitted. That's their protest vote. If this were the general election, they would have likely voted for Biden anyway, and which would have put Biden at 94%, right in line with what we expected. But they did this because they're upset about Joe Biden's handling of the Israeli Hamas war. This was their chance to protest. Now, my question is, what did you accomplish? Did you think you scared Joe Biden? Joe Biden knew what was going to happen. He knew what you were willing to try. He still won by 80%. So, what did you hope to accomplish? That's the thing about politics. Everything's so performative and not so much substantive. And they play this little game to make their point. yet no point was made and nothing will change. Now, ahead of Haley's loss in her home state of South Carolina on Saturday, she promised to campaign onward to at least Super Tuesday on March 5th. On that day, Republican primary voters and caucus goers in 16 states and the U.S. territory of American Samoa will decide on their preferred candidate for president. Like I said, Super Tuesday, 16 states and Samoa. And when she loses every one of them, it's going to be hard for her to continue to get funding. It won't be a surprise to anybody. That's why I think it's so weird that people are still giving her money when they know she's going to lose. Apparently, they're betting on the same thing that she's betting on, and they're trying to run out the clock on Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is kind of like a cockroach. No matter how many times you step on him, he still seems to crawl. But we'll see how this pans out for him. Now, Haley did not take Michigan for granted, despite polling that showed Trump leading her on average by almost 60 percentage points in the state. The former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations held two campaign events in Michigan on Sunday and Monday, the prelude to an even busier campaign itinerary in the Super Tuesday stage. She's already knocking on doors out there. She said, I'm doing what I think is right. I'm doing what I believe 70% of Americans want me to do. But Trump's win in Michigan brings the country that much closer to the outcome that has looked virtually inevitable for some time, a rematch between Trump as Republican nominee and President Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee. Trump leads Biden by 4 percentage points in Michigan, with 14% of likely voters still undecided, according to an independent Epic MRA poll that came out on Wednesday. Now, understand what that means. We're saying Donald Trump leads in the poll by 4%, but there's 14% that are undecided. Do you think that undecided is going for Donald Trump ultimately? I mean, when have you heard a Republican that is going to vote for Donald Trump being unsure of it? They admit to it, they own up to it right away. These are people that have questions in their mind whether they're going to vote for Donald Trump, probably Republicans. So the question is, what are they going to do? And there's really only two things they can do. They can't stomach voting for Donald Trump, so they're either not going to vote, which helps Joe Biden, or maybe even vote for Joe Biden just to get out from under this fucking morass of bullshit. People worry about these polls, and as I've said, the polls very often are inaccurate, and the polls in this particular primary prove it. Remember what I said? The polls said that Donald Trump was leading by 60% over Nikki Haley. But the end result was Donald Trump had 40% more than Nikki Haley. 20%, that's a lot of shit. That's a lot of shit. And it's certainly not what you would call accurate. So Super Tuesday's coming up in what, about a week or so? Yeah, a week from Tuesday. And we'll see what happens then. And we'll see what happens with Nikki Haley. And if Nikki Haley drops out, it's going to be interesting to see what the dynamic is with the Republican Party. I think there's a lot of people that think that Donald Trump won't make it to the nomination. And if he's the only one left and he's their only choice for the nominee, that puts them in a weird situation. If people are correct and he ends up dropping out for one reason or another, then what are they going to do? They are going to fucking scramble to get a candidate. Will they get Nikki Haley? Doubt it. She's damaged goods. Will they get Chris Christie? No, because he hates Donald Trump. And even though Donald Trump maybe have dropped out, they still need votes from the Trumplafucks, the cult members. And we know if Donald Trump is the nominee, there's an excellent chance that they won't vote at all. which is even more problematic for the Republican Party because they also won't vote for down ballot candidates, which puts them directly in front of a fucking blue wave. All right, we had some things going on down in Georgia, this whole case looking into disqualifying Fani Willis as a district attorney. The defense team keeps thinking they've got something on Fani Willis, and every time they try something in court, it seems to go south. And what they did yesterday didn't go well for the defendants, Donald Trump's lawyers. Georgia prosecutor Adam Abate clashed with Ashley Merchant, an attorney for Mike Roman, who is one of the defendants with Donald Trump in the RICO case, after she accused him of coaching a witness. Now, at a hearing on Tuesday, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee gave Merchant a chance to question Terrence Bradley, a former divorce attorney for Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. Abate objected as Merchant repeatedly asked why Bradley had speculated about a relationship between Wade and Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Abate said, "I'm going to object to the line of questioning, Your Honor, directed counsel to explore is where he got knowledge he's explored that he said it's speculation, and he didn't get it from any source other than his own speculation." Now, of course, Merchant lodged an objection. She said his speaking objections are clearly coaching the witness because he's regurgitating. Your Honor, I object and take offense to that comment. I'm objecting based on the law, and I'm making a record for the court. So I take offense to the comment. It's not the case, Abate shot back. All right, well, I think we can start with an objection, the grounds and the rule number, and then if I need more, I'll ask, the judge said. Merchant has argued that Willis and Wade should be disqualified for prosecuting Donald Trump and others because the prosecutors were in a romantic relationship allegedly involving financial benefit, none of which is there any evidence. Well, they were in a relationship. The question is whether it was before or after Nathan Wade was hired. But I think the point trying to be made there, whether they were in a relationship or not, that's not at issue. That's not going to disqualify Fani Willis. It's the whole financial thing, the money thing. Did Fani Willis hire Nathan Wade and then somehow benefit from the money she gave Nathan Wade? And that's a pretty weak argument, a very weak argument. And up to this point, even through yesterday, there's been no evidence that proves any of that. So at this point, while this has been messy and embarrassing for Fani Willis, there is nothing yet that's been brought forth in evidence that would suggest she should be disqualified. And understand that district attorneys have a high bar for disqualification, and they are coming with no ammo at all. Now, this case is about the 2020 presidential election. Authorities are investigating actions taken by Trump and some of his allies. We know the fact of the matter is Donald Trump committed a crime. You heard his voice in a recording. And that's going to be hard to dispute. They know it's hard to dispute. So all they can do is try to create confusion and chaos by fucking with Fani Willis. But I got to tell you, once this is all over and she is not disqualified and this court case is over, God help these people, because Fani Willis is likely to go after them for obstruction of justice, because frankly, that's what this is. These are thin arguments or non-existent arguments, and they are intended only to slow down the process or somehow upend the trial. And since there's no evidence, that's kind of illegal. All right, a new book about the lives of first ladies. that came out details the many occasions in which it was obvious to the public that Melania Trump was angry with her presidential husband. I mean, you can see it in some of the video. He tries to hold her hand. She pulls away. She gets into a vehicle. He's going to get in behind her. And then he does an about face and walks away because apparently Melania said, "Get the fuck out of here." Yeah, there's trouble in paradise when it comes to Melania and Donald Trump. Now, Katie Rogers' book, American Woman: The Transformation of the Modern First Lady from Hillary Clinton to Jill Biden, interviews dozens of sources in the Trump orbit about many disagreements the couple had, from television channels to watch to how a president should respond to horrific events unfolding in the news. It's not surprising Melania Trump even picked up on Donald Trump's ignorant behavior and thought, maybe I should tell him something. And of course she did. And of course he does what he always does and listens to nobody. And then he gets himself deeper in trouble. According to the book, one debate was Trump's long obsession with the Fox networks. Melania preferred CNN, the author says, which is ironic for how badly they've talked about CNN for woe these many years. Now, like her husband, however, she too tracked journalists who were critical of her. People magazine reported it in its write up for the book, calling it a house divided. Rogers said Melania watched CNN just as voraciously as Trump did Fox. It was reported in July of 2018 that when Trump boarded Air Force One for an overseas trip, the ex president saw Melania's television turned to CNN and was so furious he ordered all TVs to be turned to Fox in the future. Yeah, I got to tell you, if I went into my bedroom and my wife was trying to go to sleep and she was watching something particularly and I turned it off, that wouldn't go well. I'll be perfectly honest with you. If I go in there and she looks sound asleep and I turn the TV off, she'll look at me and say, "What the hell did you do?" So, I'm unlike Donald Trump, I'm not a dumb man and I learn my lessons well and I don't make mistakes the second time. Otherwise, I might not even be here to do this show. Now, that particular moment about the TV was captured in an exchange of emails between the White House military office and the White House communications agency, which called it a bit of a stir. In another incident, the couple fought over the decor in the personal residence of the first family. Now, each family that moves into the White House chooses furniture decoration to help the political fortress appear more like a home. Trump's tastes tended to be flashy, outlandish, and gold. Melania preferred a more modern style. Rogers writes that at one point the president ordered his wife's choices to be replaced with several pieces he liked better. Yeah, Donnie Trump leans more to pimp style. Melania is probably more conservative. Without so much as control over decor, Melania still wanted to signal to the public that she was optimistic about her future in Washington. That's when Melania took to Twitter, posting the message, "Looking forward to the memories we'll make in our new home." The photo darkens the furniture in the room instead of focusing on the Washington Monument and Jefferson memorials visible from the residence. Now, Rogers explained that Melania tried to maintain her independence on decor by setting up her own bedroom suite outside of her husband's and decorating it to her standards. The first couple was always rumored to sleep in different rooms, but the book appears to confirm that. Well, do you blame Melania? I mean, here's a guy that walks around and shits his pants and smells horribly. Why would you want to sleep with a motherfucker like that? Makes no sense. Melania also moved her parents into the room where Michelle Obama's mother previously lived. Other heated debates came when there were national disasters like mass shootings. The book explains Melania did not seem to mind standing apart from her husband on those topics. We know how he responded to those sorts of things. Um, it was all about him. It's always all about Donald Trump and Melania, who I'm not a huge fan of. My wife will say, I hope she writes a book. I hope she exposes Donald for who he is. And maybe she will ultimately once the divorce is final. And oh, yeah, there'll be a divorce. She'd be stupid not to divorce this dumb motherfucker, or she'll go down with him. But the fact of the matter is, I don't see Melania as a more sympathetic character. She knew what she was getting into and she got into it. And the only reason she got into it is to live a better lifestyle for more money, more position, more things. And to me, that doesn't make Melania much of a person. She's just a little more polished Donald Trump. All right, down in Florida, we've got some shit going down. Judge Aileen Cannon told former President Donald Trump's co defendants in his federal Florida case that they cannot look at classified documents, which is interesting. A lot of people thought she might go the other way, but I think she's starting to feel a little pressure from Jack Smith. Jack Smith, as much as told her, if you don't switch your mind on this, I'm going to the 11th Circuit. And so she had to back down. She knows she'd be overturned and she knows she'd probably be recused from this situation. Um, but don't think that she can save herself from this. She is going to ultimately get kicked off the case. Not only is she a little complicit with Donald Trump, biased toward Donald Trump, she's also not very bright and certainly inexperienced. She's never been a judge in a federal case like this before. And it just so happens this may be one of the biggest cases in the history of this country. That's a recipe for disaster. But even as a lawyer, she's only, I don't believe she's ever been first chair and tried a federal trial. So this woman doesn't know what she's doing. She's unethical, but she's also stupid. And to me, that may be the most dangerous combination you can possibly have. And that's why I say, even if Jack Smith might be having some luck shutting her down at certain spots, that doesn't mean he's going to back off from getting rid of her. He will get rid of her ultimately. Now, the Trump appointed judge, Aileen Cannon, sided with the special prosecutor Jack Smith and barred Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira from receiving access to secret materials produced in discovery. This is one of 4 criminal court cases Trump faces in 2024 as he inches toward becoming the Republican nominee in the presidential election. Trump has pled not guilty to charges that he willfully retained national defense information. Problem with that is it was in his house and they had to send the FBI to pull it out of his house. The only thing he can suggest is he had the right to do it, and that's not true, or that these weren't really that big a deal documents, so it was okay. Doesn't matter what was in the documents. The fact that he held the documents was all they needed to find a crime with Donald Trump. This may be the most open and shut case he has because the evidence was in his home and he refused to give it back and he tried to hide it and he disseminated it to other people. This has all been proven. And that means it's not going to go well for Donald Trump at this point. He's going to lose this case, whether it starts before or after the election. Donald Trump is definitely going down for this one. Now, on Tuesday, the big 4 congressional leaders, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, met with Joe Biden yesterday. You know what they met about? They met about this impending government shutdown Friday. That will be the first shutdown, and I think the second shutdown would be on the 4th and the 5th of March. And then that would be a complete shutdown. Sound familiar? Yeah, we've been through this before. And as I told you the previous times, they will stand tough, the Republicans, up until a certain point, and then Mike Johnson will cave to Joe Biden and the Democrats and keep the government open. If the government shut down, there's only one group of people that are going to get the blame, and it ain't the fucking Democrats. It'll be the Republicans. They all know this. The problem they have is the MAGA fucks, the small group, the crazy eights, as they called them, want to shut down the country and are making it difficult for Mike Johnson. Now, Mike Johnson's just as bad as the MAGA fucks. He is a MAGA fuck, but he also knows that he doesn't have as much leeway as MAGA would suggest he has. If he wants to survive at all, he's going to have to keep the government open. And in doing that, he's going to have to side with the Democrats a little bit. And what that means is if they had their druthers, what they would do is have a bill that they wanted, use their majority to pass that bill and get it done all on their own. Unfortunately, they can't do that because there is no unity in the Republican Party. You got these MAGA fucks coming up with crazy ideas and demanding crazy things, and the rest of the caucus in the Republican Party aren't going to vote for that shit. But on the other side, if there's a more reasonable bill put up, the more normal Republicans will vote for it, but MAGA won't vote for it. So you see the problem. No matter what they do, the Republicans will never have enough votes on their own to pass this thing. So that means they have to work with the Democrats and have the Democrats help to pass it. If the Democrats can get something close to what they want, all the Democrat votes, even if it was just half of the Republicans vote, bill passes. But that's where the MAGA fucks are going to get upset. Oh, you passed it, but you had to get Democrats' help. When has that become a bad thing? I mean, the whole purpose for having a Congress or a House of Representatives is to have two sides with differing views, but coming together, negotiating, and compromising. That's what Congress is there for. But that's the problem for MAGA. They don't want the Democrats involved in this at all. And this is why we need to get rid of the majority with the Republican Party. They do nothing but work against anything that's beneficial to the country or the people in it. Now, Biden in the White House got together with these folks to hammer out an agreement on funding the government ahead of the looming deadline. It ended with one Senate Republican publicly expressing his frustration with GOP colleagues. Now, during a gaggle with reporters on Capitol Hill, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, of all people, told CNN congressional reporter Manu Raju that he was frustrated over Congress's months-long delay in passing a bill to keep the government funded and avoid the shutdown. While he didn't name any specific Republicans, Hawley chided leadership not on ironing out hangups before the upcoming March 1 deadline. Now, if it's Josh Hawley, you know he's not talking against the MAGA fucks because he's one of them. He's trying to put pressure on the more reasonably minded that are trying to get a reasonable bill passed. This is what MAGA does. They try to put the pressure on, and time after time, it's proven that they don't have the power or the ability to do it, but they keep trying. Now, Hawley went on to say this was supposed to be done in September. Yeah, no shit. I mean, this is now almost March. I mean, this is just ridiculous. They have agreement on the budget top line. They had it since January, Hawley said. This is why I voted against the last continuing resolution. They've just been kicking this can down the road. I can't believe that they didn't get work done over the weekend. No, they took a 2-week vacation leading up to Monday. Holly added that they had months to do this stuff. I mean, my patience is run out. Well, Holly, our patience on you has run out. They're all to blame, and at this point, it's just absurd. This is what Holly said. Now, Schumer reportedly called the White House meeting productive and intense, particularly on the topic of Ukraine funding. According to Raju, McConnell was the most outspoken proponent of sending a new supplemental foreign aid package to aid Ukraine as quickly as possible, particularly as the Ukrainian military was recently forced to surrender the city of Avdiivka to Russian forces due to not having enough ammunition. Now, Raju later told CNN host Dana Bash that the current disagreement on funding boils down to a Republican on Republican dispute, saying that McConnell called for a funding bill to be passed quickly without any poison pills that would give individual members pause about supporting it. He also described a significant amount of Republican on Republican diversion or division on Ukraine. Speaker Johnson insisted on not passing Ukraine aid before holding a vote on additional funding for the southern border. He previously refused to hold a vote on $14 billion in border funding earlier this month after former President Donald Trump threatened Republicans considering it. Now, you can bet that Donald Trump will be sticking his nose in this motherfucking thing, and he'll be telling them what to do, and they will be confused. Do we do the right thing, or do we do Donald Trump's thing? Seems like an easy choice, but we've seen over the last 3 years, or a couple of years anyway, they have trouble making that decision. Finally, we're going to wrap things up with House Oversight and Accountability Chair James Comer went after the FBI on Tuesday in the wake of the arrest and charging of an informant to the GOP allegations against the president. Don't you just love it? James Comer is trying to blame FBI, the same FBI that told him, don't use this stuff, don't publicize this stuff or this witness. Now, of course, it's the FBI's fault. What about you, James? You're a representative in the House of Representatives. You didn't listen to the warning. You didn't want to hear it because you were too desperate to go after Joe Biden and you thought you'd take a shortcut and that you'd never get caught. But here's what you need to learn, James Comer and Jim Jordan and all the rest. You always get caught because you're fucking stupid criminals. Comer said that everything that he's had to do with the FBI has been very suspicious throughout the House Republicans' probe into President Biden. FBI has been suspicious. What about the Republicans in the House? You're carrying on hearings with absolutely no evidence. Your star witness is a liar and a asset for Russian intelligence. That sounds pretty suspicious to me. Comer went on and said, the trust level that I have with the FBI is zero. Comer said in an interview on Mornings with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business. Comer also said all he and House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan knew about the informant was that the FBI Director Christopher Wray said the informant was one of their most trusted, highest paid in the Bureau. Yeah, that's not exactly true. They were also told not to use this witness or the evidence or publicize it. They had successfully used this informant to prosecute criminals in the past, and they had been with the Bureau over a decade. Now, the informant, Alexander Smirnov, has been important in House Republican allegations that Biden accepted a bribe. That's where the information came from Alexander Smirnov, that Joe Biden took a bribe. Now that we know he's a liar and a Russian asset, why is it even at issue at this point? Republican lawmakers have often noted conversations that Smirnov had with the FBI about the head of the Ukraine energy company, Burisma, telling him that he paid both Biden and his son, Hunter Biden, $5 million. Yeah, but we know he's a fucking liar and a Russian asset. So maybe throw that shit out the window. We know what he said was an absolute lie. question I have here is when the investigation is going to happen into James Comer, Jim Jordan, Grassley of Iowa. They were the ones behind all of this, pushing all of this. They knew what they knew, and there needs to be an investigation into this without question because there's actual evidence. There's far more reason to look into this particular incident than there ever was with regards to Joe Biden being complicit, taking bribes, or that sort of thing. There's been no evidence, and we now know the story that was told by a lying informant, fed the information by Russian intelligence. We know it was a lie. So why do we continue with this thing at all? Some people have suggested that if they continue to try to impeach Joe Biden, they become even more guilty of using Russian intelligence disinformation. And that is a problem for these fucks. They may not see indictments or any investigation right away, but I guarantee you, once we get past the 2024 election and they are no longer in the majority, there's going to be some indictments and there's going to be some investigations and there's going to be some people trying to save their ass, flipping on whoever, or ultimately being charged and convicted. So that's coming. We got enough stuff to worry about, but we need to shut down this whole thing because it's all a lie and it's all Russian disinformation. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.